The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jed, this is one of those nights when we just have too much. I mean, just from the Tulsi Gabbard hearing alone, there's too much to cover, which is why I'm glad you covered the Georgia part of it, because in your hour, because we don't have that here, and we don't have enough time to get through what we have to get through.
Too many hours to cover, but I'll look forward to watching what will you pull out of that crazy morning.
Well, we're going to get right to it. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Well, this afternoon, the dignified transfer of 6 Air Force personnel who were killed when their refueling plane crashed in Donald Trump's new war zone took place at Dover Air Force Base. Donald Trump was in attendance this time after he skipped the second dignified transfer of his war. This time, Donald Trump did not demean the event by wearing a ridiculous hat. It was closed to the press at the request of the families, but one of the families has already seemed to indicate that Donald Trump is to blame for the death of Air Force Sergeant Tyler Simmons, age 28, of Columbus, Ohio. Here's what Sergeant Simmons' grandmother and cousin said on Monday.
This could have been prevented. We didn't need to be in this war. You know, this is uncalled for. And this is what we get.
Families are suffering right now. Not only our family, but there are other families that's lost loved ones. And just to create a war because you want to create a war, it's not right. It is not right.
The other 5 members of the Air Force who went down on that plane were Major John Klinner, 33, of Auburn, Alabama, Captain Ariana Savino, 31, of Covington, Washington, Sergeant Ashley Pruitt, 34, of Bardstown, Kentucky, Captain Seth Koval, 38, of Stoutsville, Ohio, and Captain Curtis Angst of Wilmington, Ohio, age 30. Today, Sergeant Tyler Simmons' mother said this in an interview with CBS.
The knock on the door, you're hoping that it's not a knock that, you just don't want. And when they knocked on the door, and Milo answered the door, I heard him say, "Oh no," and I knew, I knew. And it was, and from there on, life would never, ever, ever be the same. It will never be the same. He was our only child, grandchildren we won't have, him being married. And, he wanted to be married. He wanted to have children. Everything stopped. It just stopped. And, and that's hard. It's hard and it's hurtful, But he was an impact to this world. He was a hero to his family. He was a hero to his friends. They loved him and he loved them. He was a man of purpose. And in his 28 years, I just thank God that he was the way he was. I mean, and Tyler was, "Mom, I'm doing this. I understand the risk. And I know this is what it's going to take. I know I could lose my life." He said, "But this is what I want to do. I was born for this." And so, how can you fight with that?
There was obviously no imminent threat to the United States coming from Iran that justified Donald Trump starting a war. Sergeant Simmons' family is right about that. And they got confirmation of that. It came from Donald Trump's director of the National Counterterrorism Center, who resigned on Tuesday and publicized his resignation letter to Donald Trump, saying there was no imminent threat that justified Donald Trump's war in Iran. Joe Kent worked in an intelligence community run by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who refused to contradict Joe Kent's resignation letter yesterday. Tulsi Gabbard also refused to contradict Joe Kent today in Senate testimony. Tulsi Gabbard was offered an opportunity to say that she agreed with Donald Trump's claim that there was an imminent threat from Iran, and she publicly refused to agree with Donald Trump. And so the question for Tulsi Gabbard tonight is, will she quit or be fired because of what is now her obvious public disagreement with Donald Trump on his war in Iran. Joe Kent was a hardcore Trump supporter until Donald Trump launched his war in Iran, and now Joe Kent is talking to other hardcore Trump supporters who are opposed to Donald Trump's war. Here's what he said tonight.
The argument that there was an imminent threat, as in Iran was planning to attack us immediately, that just simply did not exist. When we always assessed that they were either several months or a year, 2 years away from actually being able to develop a nuclear weapon. And that's not because the Iranians are stupid people. I think we can tell right now that the Iranians are anything but stupid. They had the ability, I think, that the brain power to actually develop one, or they could have simply traded a ton of oil with Pakistan or with someone else to actually get a nuclear weapon. They were not doing that. We had no intelligence to indicate that they were.
Joe Kent said the United States and Israel now have different objectives in the war.
I think most folks right now at the Pentagon and the intelligence agencies, they would say us and the Israelis actually have a different objective here. I don't believe that our objective has been clearly defined because we're shying away from regime change. The Israelis are not shying away from regime change. They want to knock out lock, stock, and barrel the current government. They don't seem to have a plan for what comes next.
Israeli intelligence reports have said that they would expect Iranians who try to revolt against the Ayatollah Khomeini's control of the country to be destroyed. In her Senate testimony today, Tulsi Gabbard said that it is the intelligence community's assessment that the Iranian dictatorial regime is still firmly in control of the country. And here is what Tulsi Gabbard said in her Senate testimony when she was asked, who's right? Donald Trump, who said that the United States could be hit with an Iranian nuclear weapon 2 weeks from now if he didn't launch his war, or Joe Kent, who said there was no imminent threat.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, yes or no?
Senator, the only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president.
False.
And
This
he
is the
made that
worldwide. This is the
determination.
worldwide threats hearing where you present to Congress national intelligence, timely, objective, and independent of political considerations. You've stated today that the intelligence community's assessment is that Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated and that, quote, there had been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. Was it the intelligence community's assessment that nevertheless, despite this obliteration, there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Yes or no?
It is not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent threat.
Okay.
That is up to
Here's
the
the
president
problem.
based on a volume
No,
of
it is
information
precisely
that he receives.
It is precisely your responsibility to determine what constitutes a threat to the United States. This is the worldwide threats hearing, where, as you noted in your opening testimony, quote, you represent the IC's assessment of threats. You are here to represent the IC's assessment of threats. That's a quote from your own opening statement. And so my question is, as you're here to present the IC's assessment of threats, was it the assessment of the intelligence community that, as the White House claimed on March 1st, there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Yes or no?
Once again, Senator, the intelligence community has provided the inputs that make up this annual threat assessment.
You won't answer the
It is
question.
the nature of the imminent threat that the president has to make that determination based on a collection and volume
You're here
of
to be
information and
timely.
intelligence that he is provided with.
You're here to be timely, objective, and independent of political considerations.
Exactly what I'm doing.
No, you're evading a question because to provide a candid response to the committee would contradict a statement from the White House.
It would have been so easy for Tulsi Gabbard to say, I agree with the president's judgment that there was an imminent threat. She refused to do that, refused to tell that lie for Donald Trump. And in refusing to do that, she is actually defying Donald Trump, not protecting Donald Trump. And of course, she is also lying when she said that the only person who can determine what is and isn't an imminent threat is the president. That is simply perjury. Tulsi Gabbard was asked about recent reports that Vladimir Putin has been helping Iran target the American military in this war.
Could you update us on the intelligence on Russian intelligence sharing with Iran in the current conflict? What do we know?
Senator, if there is that sharing going on, that would be an answer that would be appropriate for a closed session.
Well, it's been in the public press. This is open source that it's occurring. Is it occurring?
Again, if it is occurring, that would be an answer appropriate for a closed session. What I can tell you is that according to the Department of War, any support that Iran may be receiving is not inhibiting their operational effects.
Okay, that's sort of the first cousin of a yes.
And then Tulsi Gabbard had to resort to lying again and pretend that she is the only person in America who doesn't know that Donald Trump said that he was surprised that the Iranians closed the Strait of Hormuz. The Wall Street Journal reported on March 13th that Donald Trump, quote, told his team that Tehran would likely capitulate before closing the strait. And even if Iran tried, the U.S. military could handle it. That is what the stupidest military tactician in history thought before he launched his war. And Tulsi Gabbard knows that. And so today, she chose to pretend that she doesn't know that.
The president continues to say as well that, he had no idea, was shocked that the Iranians had moved to take over the Strait of Hormuz. Did you provide any intelligence that would say that it would be that it was not likely that the Iranians would try to move on the strait?
I'm not aware of those remarks, and I think those of us here at the table can point to the fact that historically the Iranians have always threatened to leverage their control over
But why would
the
the
Strait
president
of
say he was
Hormuz.
amazed?
I'm not aware of those remarks.
What about the comments the president made that thought that he was surprised again, reports that Iran struck the adjacent Gulf states?
Again, I'm not aware of those remarks.
In the written version of Tulsi Gabbard's opening statement to the committee, she said, as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. There has been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. So that was Tulsi Gabbard saying, of course, Iran had no nuclear capability whatsoever when Donald Trump launched his war. But for some reason, she left that line out of her opening statement when she spoke her statement to the committee.
Even in your printed testimony today on page 6, and your last paragraph on page 6, as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. There's been no efforts to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. You omitted that paragraph from your oral opening. Was that because the president had said there was an imminent threat 2 weeks?
No, sir, I recognize that the time was running long, and I skipped through some of the portions
So you chose to take
of my oral delivered remarks.
You chose
sir.
to omit the parts that contradict the president.
And so, having launched a war when there was no imminent threat to the United States, which has led to dramatically higher oil prices, with gasoline prices now averaging almost $1 higher than last month, Donald Trump's chief economic advisor, the most incompetent one in presidential history, said that price increases driven by Donald Trump's tariffs and now Donald Trump's war are, quote, the last of our concerns right now, no matter how long Donald Trump's war continues.
The fact is that the U.S. economy is fundamentally sound, and that if it were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about, if that continued, what we would have to do about that. But that's really the last of our concerns right now, because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule.
The last of our concerns. Voters seem to understand that, including one Trump voter who is paying those higher gas prices in Pennsylvania, Amanda Robbins, who told Jonathan Allen what she would like to say to Donald Trump right now.
If you could say something to President Trump and he was going to hear you right now, what would it be? You are a worthless pile of
And you voted for him how many times?
3 times. That was my bad. Apparently, I'm an idiot.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. She's a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Foreign Relations Committee, and the Veterans Affairs Committee. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight. As a combat veteran, watching now the third dignified transfer from Donald Trump's war, what are your thoughts as we're in the third week of it?
Well, just absolute fury that this man expended the lives of our heroes, of people who are willing to do something he was never willing to do himself, which is serve in uniform for a war of choice that did not have to happen. He wasted those lives. You know, our men and women in the military will step up and do their jobs to the best of their ability every single time. But that means that we have the responsibility, those of us in the legislative branch, to make those decisions about war. And Donald Trump launched a war without coming to Congress, without looking at the consequences. And as a result of it, 11 brave men and women in uniform have died. Gas prices have gone through the roof. And Americans are less safe than they were before he launched this war.
What was your reaction to Tulsi Gabbard's testimony today?
I wish she would just grow a spine and stand up to Donald Trump. She obviously was lying to the committee by omission. She obviously did not want to back the president, but also did not want to stand up to him. This is the problem. This is the problem we have right now. Republicans will not stand up to this president. Republicans will not tell him that you are wrong. We need to stop this. You now have Mr. Kent, who did quit. Tulsi Gabbard should be quitting, and she's not doing it.
As we go forward, what is possible now in the Trump war? He's obviously demonstrated that the American military has not been able to control the Strait of Hormuz, for example.
Well, he doesn't have very many choices. The worst choice he could make would be to put boots on the ground. And that will lead to the killing of many more American servicemen and women. Again, for what purpose, we do not know. He needs to develop an off-ramp to this. He cut off the head of the biggest snake. Listen, I am not sad that the Ayatollah is dead. But on the other hand, he replaced him with his son, who is arguably worse than the father, more brutal than the father, more involved in the running of the IRGC than the father. And he needs to come up with a plan of what we're going to do next, and he needs to come to Congress. I am really disappointed that tonight my Republican colleagues once again defeated the efforts by Senate Democrats to have a war powers resolution pass that would stop this war until Donald Trump comes to Congress and justifies what he's doing with this war of choice. And yet, once again, all my Republican colleagues voted against the war powers resolution. But we're not going to stop. We're going to keep bringing it forward.
Senator Tammy Duckworth, thank you very much for starting off our coverage tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, we've never seen a confirmation hearing like the one today for Kristi Noem's replacement at the Department of Homeland Security. That's next. Senators have always had the easiest possible confirmation hearings when they are nominated for cabinet posts. Historically, the confirmation hearings for senators were quick and non-controversial, and the committee votes were unanimous, and the votes on the Senate floor were usually unanimous. That was all before Donald Trump took control of the Republican Party. And so today, a Republican senator nominated to be Secretary of Homeland Security had the strangest confirmation hearing the Senate has ever seen, with the Republican chairman of the committee, who opposes the nomination by the Republican president, beginning the hearing this way.
Through the years, I've personally been exposed multiple times to political violence. I was in the right field batting cage when the crazed shooter unleashed nearly 200 shots at our congressional baseball practice. I'll never forget Steve Scalise valiantly trying to drag his body away as the gunman continued. Later that year, a Trump-hating felon attacked me from behind in my yard. I was just straightening up from picking up a tree limb. I was wearing noise cancellation headphones. Never saw him coming. Running pell-mell down the hill. I was struck in the back. The force of the blow sent us through the air nearly 10 feet, down the hill until his shoulder impaled me as we hit the ground. 6 of my ribs were broken. 3 of the ribs were completely separated, such that for weeks, the ends of the ribs would grind upon each other. My lung was damaged. For weeks, I could inhale, but not have the rib strength to exhale. I developed 2 pneumonias. The pain was such that I could only sit up in bed by tying a rope to the foot of the bed and pulling myself up. But even then, the pain was that of 1,000 knives. Over the year of recovery, I began to cough up blood. I underwent removal of part of my lung. Complications led to an infection in the space between my lung and chest wall. I spent a week in the hospital having the infection lavaged every 6 hours through a chest tube. Recently, Senator Mullen, if you have time to listen, you were confronted by constituents that were angry because you voted against my amendment to stop all funding for refugee welfare programs. Instead of explaining your vote to continue these welfare programs for refugees, you decided to transfer the blame. You told the media that I was a freaking snake and that you completely understood why I had been assaulted. I was shocked that you would justify and celebrate this violent assault that caused me so much pain and my family so much pain. I just wonder if someone who applauds violence against their political opponents is the right person to lead an agency that has struggled to accept limits to the proper use of force. Tell it to my face. If that's what you believe, tell it to me today. Tell the world why you believe I deserve to be assaulted from behind, have 6 ribs broken and a damaged lung. Tell me to my face why you think I deserved it. And while you're at it, explain to the American public why they should trust a man with anger issues to set the proper example for ICE and Border Patrol agents.
And that was just from Chairman Rand Paul's opening statement. That's before the committee turned to questions. In his opening statement, Oklahoma's junior senator, Markwayne Mullin, responded this way.
I simply addressed that I said I could understand because of the behavior you were having, that I could understand why the neighbor did what he did. As far as my terms as a snake in the grass, sir, I work around this room to try to fix problems. I've worked with many people in this room. Seems like you fight Republicans more than you work with us.
That is, of course, lazy perjury. Rand Paul votes with Republicans about 99% of the time. And Markwayne Mullin knew going into the hearing that he did not need Rand Paul's vote to be confirmed because Democratic Senator John Fetterman announced last week that he would vote for Senator Mullin's confirmation in the committee and on the Senate floor. The good news of the hearing is that Kristi Noem is no longer Homeland Security Secretary, and Markwayne Mullin said he would scale back some of the worst practices of the Department of Homeland Security, including this one.
I said, we will not enter a home or a place of business without a judicial warrant unless we're pursuing the individual that runs into a place of business or a resident or a house.
And unlike Donald Trump's fired Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, Senator Mullin was willing to say he was wrong to rush to judgment about the murders committed by Donald Trump's invasion forces in Minneapolis. But he refused to apologize about what he said about the victims, Renee Good and Alex Preddy.
After DHS officers shot and killed 2 American citizens this past January, you joined top administrative officials in publicly blaming and disparaging the victims. Following the killing of Renee Good, Secretary Noem called her a domestic terrorist. You, sir, you called Alex Preddy, quote, a deranged individual that came in to cause max damage. Could we expect those kinds of quick responses if you are confirmed as secretary? Would you be basically, well, you responded as Secretary Noem. Are we going to just expect that same behavior all over again?
Those words probably should have been retracted. I shouldn't have said that, and as secretary, I wouldn't. The investigation is ongoing, and there is, like I said, there's sometimes going to make a mistake, and I'll own it. That one, I went out there too fast. I was responding immediately without the facts. That's my fault. That won't happen as secretary.
Like every Trump team confirmation hearing, Markwayne Mullin had to present himself as too stupid to know who won the 2020 presidential election.
You have your own history. You did not certify the 2020 election. There are people at the Department of Homeland Security, 3 people specifically who are well-known election deniers now running election security functions. Who won the 2020 election?
Ma'am, we know that President Joe Biden was sworn into office. He was the president for the last 4 years.
But I do believe won the election?
My job as Department of Homeland Security Secretary will be to make sure that we assure that the elections are fair and people can trust them.
He's lying again, of course, because he knows who won the presidential election in 2020, but is afraid to say so. And he knows, or should know, that it is not the job of the Secretary of Homeland Security to have anything to do with elections in America. Markwayne Mullin is by far the stupidest senator I have seen serving the state of Oklahoma. And so the good news is that Oklahoma will get rid of its stupidest senator. And judging by Oklahoma's senior senator, Republican James Lankford, one of the more occasionally reasonable Republican senators who used to be a very reasonable Republican senator before Trump came along, and judging by the previous Republican senators from Oklahoma and the Democratic senators from Oklahoma, the state has a very good chance of ending up with a better United States senator. And as bad as Markwayne Mullin was in his Senate confirmation hearing today, he appeared to clear the bar of being better than Kristi Noem. And so the good news, if you can call it that, is that Donald Trump's next Homeland Security Secretary might, just might, be better than the worst Homeland Security Secretary in history. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona. He's a member of the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Senator, thank you very much. You were in that committee hearing today, and one of the Republican senators on the committee said kind of midway that, of course, he's going to be confirmed, and the votes do appear to be there. Is it possible that he would be better than Kristi Noem?
It's not possible. It's not because of him. It's because Kristi Noem nor Senator Mullin will be ever in charge of the Department of Homeland Security. This operation is being run by Stephen Miller. That man who is out to deport anybody he can, especially those that aren't white, is in charge of DHS. This is why they're racially profiling. This is why Latinos feel that they have to walk around with passports all over this country. Which is why Native Americans are being held and detained until some of these, ICE agents that only had, 45 days of training, figure out that, Native Americans are also U.S. citizens. Which is why 2 Americans were killed in the span of 2 weeks by agents in Minnesota. And so while I'm sure Senator Mullin wants to do well, and I think could do well, he is not going to be in charge of it, much like Kristi Noem was not in charge of it. And it's been very clear that that's been the case from day one. This is why we have these random quotas that these our ICE agents are out there picking up, U.S. citizens, picking up DACA recipients, just trying to hope they can make their quota so they won't get yelled at by their bosses, because Stephen Miller is leading this operation every day.
So what I did hear, though, in some pieces of his testimony was a kind of at least rhetorical retreat from what the Trump Noem position has been.
I think you're going to hear that a lot. And partly it's because the politics have changed so much within the Republican Party that they know they're going to lose elections. That there are people that are extremely mad about this, immigration enforcement that's gone overboard, that's killing Americans, that's racially profiling, especially Latino voters who feel particularly targeted by this. And they've shown that, by the way, in their election results so far. So now they're going to actually try to change the rhetoric, but they're not going to change their actions. They're not, it's not like they have stopped buying these massive warehouses they're going to turn into these detention centers. They're going to be pushing thousands of Americans through. For those that watch, Spanish TV or watch, any type of Spanish news at all, we hear consistently about, the abuses of ICE, where they're going after these, women and men that are here in this country, some illegally, some with different types of status, but none of them criminals, and being separated from their families. We hear about the detention centers being awful places where people are dying, feeling, detached from society, entirely being abused. And this is, obviously leaping up into the newspapers. And now the administration, the Republicans, are trying to play some level of trying to fix their political problem. At the end of the day, though, Stephen Miller cares more about punishing these brown people than he is about having good professional immigration enforcement. And I just don't think Senator Mullen's going to have any power over that.
Senator Ruben Gallego, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, last night, Congressman Ro Khanna broke the news here on this program that Donald Trump's Attorney General would be meeting with the House Oversight Committee today. Congressman Khanna was in the room when the meeting went off the rails, and he will join us next. Yesterday, the House Oversight Committee made big news by issuing a subpoena to Donald Trump's Attorney General to testify under oath about her handling of the Epstein files. And last night on this program, Congressman Ro Khanna broke news right here by telling us that Attorney General Pamela Bondi was scheduled to give a closed-door briefing today to the committee about the Epstein files. In the middle of whatever was going on behind closed doors today, many of the Democrats left the room to explain what was happening. Congressman Maxwell Frost said this.
To me, it's very clear that the purpose of this entire fake hearing, this fake deposition, is the Attorney General trying to weasel herself out of sitting in front of us under oath, under a bipartisan subpoena that we gave her committee. We asked her multiple times, are you going to come and speak with us under oath? She would not say yes. Filibuster, filibuster, filibuster would not say yes. And so why do we, and then our Republican colleagues say, is this not enough? Why don't you want to speak to her now? We want her under oath because we do not trust her. Why don't we trust her? Because she's a liar. Look at how that Judiciary Committee hearing went. She was spying on members of Congress when they were in the DOJ looking at the documents unredacted. Look at what she's done as far as not putting documents relating to Donald Trump on the website, not releasing them, and only doing it when the public noticed and said something about it. We want her under oath because we don't trust her. We want her under oath because she has shown that she is involved in a cover-up. My Republican colleagues under the last administration would not stand for this, with Merrick Garland being in front of them not being under oath. They wouldn't allow that to happen for a second. So we see this for what it is. This is not a briefing. A briefing is when we sit down and we're getting information from the person giving the briefing. That didn't happen here. She sat down. They started the clock like a hearing. It's a hearing. It's a fake deposition where no one can see what's going on, where there's zero transcription, where it's not on C-SPAN or anything, and where no one is under oath and they are allowed to freely lie to members of Congress.
When the session was over, the Attorney General spoke to reporters for a few minutes and said that the Justice Department tried their very best to protect the identities of the victims and the survivors mentioned in the Epstein files, but they made some mistakes.
We had 500 attorneys with the Criminal Division, with the National Security Division, with the FBI working around the clock to do the best we could. I think it was less than 1%. Error.
And then Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, who is now the Deputy Attorney General, actually used Richard Nixon's famous words when President Nixon made reference to the crimes committed in the Oval Office. Mistakes were made.
Mistakes were made, and there were mistakes made.
That is like a group of surgeons coming out of the operating room and telling you mistakes were made. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California, a member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman Khanna, I have to tell you, I was stunned when I heard Todd Blanche use Nixon's exact words. Mistakes were made.
I didn't realize actually until I heard you, Lawrence, that Nixon used the exact phrase.
But look, this hearing quickly devolved. They were nervous. In fact, I was very surprised that Deputy Attorney General Blanche and Pam Bondi actually complimented me. They said, thank you to Thomas Massie and you for passing the law. So I thought, okay, maybe this is going to be constructive. But then I asked them about the 50% of documents that haven't been released, about the 302 forms that we've discussed many times on this show, that Bradley Edwards, the victim's lawyer, has discussed. That's where the survivors mentioned the other men, and they were all redacted. And I said, why did you redact them? Can you release them? And they went back to their standard talking points saying, we just redacted them to protect the survivors. I said, well, the survivors don't want that redacted, and you're hiding the most important parts. But they resorted to the talking points. But the two things that I found most disturbing, they refused to confirm to Ranking Member Garcia Pam Bondi that she would actually sit for the deposition. They refused to do that to other members. And then the chairman, who both Ranking Member Garcia and I have a relationship, used a sexist slur against one of our members. I can't even repeat it on air, an African-American woman, Summer Lee, that I just thought was totally uncalled for.
Did the Attorney General say anything about the transfer of Ghislaine Maxwell from a prison to a prison camp?
She did not. We did not get into that because we did not want her to think that this would suffice to get out of the deposition. Now, I think their plan didn't work. Comer has reaffirmed that the Attorney General needs to come before the committee. She has to answer the questions and things about why was Ghislaine Maxwell transferred? Why were 3 of the witness interviews involving Donald Trump concealed? Why were they not released? Why are the 302 forms not coming in? We were unified in insisting that she testify under oath, and that's going to happen now on April 14th.
So were the Democrats concerned that if they asked substantive questions that the Attorney General would just claim, I've answered all their questions?
Exactly. We caught on a few questions in. I was early. Because I have a fair amount of seniority. And initially she was gracious. We were trying to get answers. And then we caught on that she wasn't even willing to commit to the deposition. And so we didn't want to give her an excuse saying, well, I've already come before the committee. I've answered the questions. I don't need to be under oath. And so we quickly switched our strategy to ensuring that she commits to being under deposition. And as you know, Lawrence, that's very different than members of Congress asking her things. She's asked things by professional counsel who do this for a living, and she's going to be under oath, and she's going to have to live with that long after she's Attorney General. And there are a lot of questions about why she concealed certain things, why they're still concealing things.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
And coming up, MS Now has new exclusive reporting tonight on Donald Trump's pardons and the convicted criminals Donald Trump has let out of prison. That's next. On Donald Trump's first day in office, he pardoned every single person who attacked the Capitol for him and every single person who violently assaulted police officers for him on January 6th. In November, Donald Trump pardoned the former president of Honduras, Juan Fernandez, who was convicted of drug trafficking more than 500 tons of cocaine into the United States. The New York Times reported the former president, quote, once boasted that he would stuff the drugs up the gringos' noses. He accepted a $1 million bribe from El Chapo to allow cocaine shipments to pass through Honduras. A man was killed in prison to protect him. Donald Trump set him free. Donald Trump's pardons and commutations of criminals have wiped out more than $1 billion in court-ordered restitutions to victims of those crimes. That includes the $15.5 million David Gentile was ordered to pay back after he was convicted of conspiracy to defraud investors. Donald Trump's pardon of David Gentile is the focus of the first installment of MS Now's new series, Justice Interrupted. MS Now Justice correspondent Ken Delanian has more.
Shortly after Carol Ann Tutera lost her husband, her investment advisor came to her with what he touted as a great opportunity.
My gosh, I've got all these incredible, amazing, wonderful products that you have to get into. There was going to be a monthly payout. There was going to be a nice return in a couple of years. I got my sister involved and my older mother involved.
A few years later, she discovered it was a scam. She says she and her relatives are out $500,000. But at least the legal system offered a measure of justice. A jury found David Gentile guilty last year of what prosecutors say was $1 billion fraud that victimized as many as 17,000 investors. He was sent to prison for 7 years. But then President Trump set him free.
I was shocked.
He was just 12 days into his prison term in December when Trump commuted his sentence. It was part of a series of puzzling clemency decisions by Trump that experts say amounts to the most random and reckless use of that awesome presidential power in American history.
Donald Trump granted clemency to some perpetrators of massive white-collar frauds that have harmed many, many victims, including individuals who've lost a great deal of money.
Liz Oyer was the Justice Department's pardon attorney until she was fired last year, she says, over her refusal to restore gun rights to the actor Mel Gibson after his conviction on domestic violence charges.
The things that the Justice Department traditionally looks for are acceptance of responsibility, remorse, rehabilitation, a significant track record of good conduct in the community before we would recommend someone for consideration of a presidential pardon.
The president has granted pardons or commutations to a long list of corrupt politicians and convicted fraudsters. Also, a Chinese crypto billionaire, a Honduran drug lord, and at least 169 people convicting of assaulting police in the January 6th attack. Experts say few, if any, of these defendants would have received clemency in any other administration. Many of them have been Trump supporters or have hired lawyers with connections to Trump.
That is really unfair to those who are deserving and who are patiently waiting their turn but are being overlooked.
The White House said Gentile had been treated unfairly.
This is another example that has been brought to the president's attention of a weaponization of justice from the previous administration.
But the sentences for Gentile and his partner were announced by Trump's hand-picked U.S. attorney in New York and a top FBI official who the president recently appointed to be deputy FBI director. They said Gentile wove a web of lies and deserved his prison term. Prosecutors said Gentile faked financial statements and misrepresented the source of monthly investor distributions. The payouts came not from profits but from other investors, prosecutors said, and they called it a hallmark of a Ponzi scheme.
I felt like it was another Bernie Madoff deal.
That's what it felt like for you.
It truly did. I'm going to take your money and I'm going to pay out over here and then I'm going to run out of money.
Carol Ann and other victims are trying to recover some of their lost funds. But Trump's commutation means Gentile won't have to pay $15 million in court-ordered restitution. Her sister, Julie Ullman, lost $100,000. That loss was devastating for her retirement plans.
I'll be working a lot longer than I anticipated.
I'm not going to take the vacations I thought I would because now I really have to watch the funds.
If you had President Trump sitting in this chair right now about this, what would you say to him?
What made you think that he was so special to let him off in 2 weeks?
Ken Delanian, MS Now, Scottsdale, Arizona.
David Gentile did not respond to MS Now's request for comment. We'll be right back. That is tonight's last word.